In Cottonwood Creek, a dusty village in the heart of Arizona, where the sun scorched the skin and solitude was a landscape, Martha Evans felt the weight of a world crumbling. At 60 years old, with silver hair and hands marked by time, she carried a secret she could no longer hide: a pregnancy. There was no joy, only the bitter taste of shame and abandonment. Her only son, James, a man hardened by life and his own ambition, had turned his back. His words still echoed in her mind, cold as the desert night. "I can't have this stain on my name, Mother. I already have too many problems." Martha, a woman of strong character who had overcome the Great Depression and the early loss of a husband, now found herself alone, her belly growing and her heart withering. The small wooden house, once full of memories, now seemed like a tomb. While Martha sank into her own melancholy, in the neighborhood lived Arthur Sterling, a widower whose life seemed like a book with its last pages torn out. Arthur, in his early 70s, was a robust man, with tired eyes and a grizzled beard that blended with the dust of the roads. He had lost his wife, Sarah, over a decade ago, and since then, his ranch, once vibrant and full of laughter, had become an echo of silence. Cows and horses were his only companions, and the nights, the longest in the desert, were filled only with memories and the distant howl of coyotes. He saw Martha occasionally, a quiet figure who tended her flowers with an almost painful dedication. Arthur felt a pang of pity for her, but life in Cottonwood Creek taught that pain was a silent companion, and everyone carried theirs as best they could. However, something in Martha's posture in recent months had changed, a fragility he had never before noticed. The small town, with its slow pace and curious glances, began to notice the changes in Martha. Gossip, like the dry wind that stirred the dust in the streets, spread from house to house. "Have you seen Mrs. Evans? She's different." Murmurs about age, about decency, about the shame of an older woman carrying a new life. Martha felt the weight of these stares, which followed her to the general store and Sunday church. She tried to hide, covering herself with wide shawls and avoiding the few neighbors. However, her condition advanced, and her body stubbornly screamed the truth. Loneliness became overwhelming. She longed for a word of comfort, for a look that would not judge her, but only the understanding that the desert offered: silence and space. In those days, the image of James, her son, appeared like a ghost, reminding her of the rejection that hurt more than the physical pain itself. One day, as Martha hesitated at the entrance of Cottonwood Creek's only general store, Arthur Sterling was leaving. Their eyes met, and Arthur realized, with almost painful clarity, the truth that the whispers dared not utter aloud. Martha's belly, now prominent, left no doubt. Instead of turning away like the others, Arthur stopped. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Evans," he said, his voice deep and gentle. Martha flinched, expecting judgment, disapproval, but Arthur merely added, "It seems the garden work is yielding good fruits this year." There was no malice in his voice, just a simple observation about the land he loved. Martha looked at him, surprised. It was the first genuine kindness she had received in months. At that moment, something tiny, almost imperceptible, began to shift. Arthur, in turn, felt a silent call, a strange curiosity about the story of this woman who carried so much suffering within her. From that day on, Arthur began to observe Martha more closely. It wasn't idle curiosity, but a silent empathy that came from his own experience with pain and loneliness. He noticed that Martha's house was deteriorating, the fences falling, and the garden, once so well kept, now displayed weeds. Each morning, as he drank his coffee on the porch, he saw Martha struggling to carry water buckets or chop wood, tasks that became increasingly difficult for her. One afternoon, during a sudden dust storm, Arthur found her trying to fix a loose roof, her body bent with fatigue and the strong wind. Without a word, he tied his horse and, with his calloused hands, climbed onto the roof, working silently until the shingle was in place. Martha watched him from the doorway, a tear tracing a path down her dusty face. There, in the middle of that village where she had been so judged, a stranger, a lonely widower, offered help without asking for anything in return. In time, Arthur's help became a constant but discreet presence. He left chopped firewood on Martha's porch, brought fresh vegetables from his garden, and even repaired the fence that separated their two properties. Never a word about the pregnancy, only gestures of kindness that disarmed Martha's loneliness. She, in turn, began to open up, offering him a piece of freshly baked pie or a glass of lemonade on hotter days. In these small exchanges, Arthur began to notice a sparkle in her eyes that pain had obscured. He perceived the strength in her voice when she spoke of life's hardships, the wisdom that each wrinkle on her face recounted. For Arthur, Martha was not the pregnant, abandoned woman the town judged, but a resilient soul who, like desert flowers, blossomed even in the most arid conditions. One day, while Arthur helped Martha fix her property gate, their conversation deepened. Martha, exhausted and feeling the first contractions, unburdened herself. The words poured out like a dammed river. The sadness of the unexpected pregnancy, the shame, and the cruelty of her son James, who had completely rejected her. She spoke of the loneliness that consumed her, of the pain of having been abandoned by the one who should have loved her most. Arthur listened to every word without judgment, his expression serious and attentive. When Martha finished, he took a deep breath. "Martha," he began, his voice low, "I know what loneliness is, and I know what it's like to have a child who disappoints us." He paused, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "My Sarah, she had a son before she met me, a good boy always working on the railroads. But one day he disappeared. I never heard from him again. He took his mother's secret with him, a secret she asked me to protect until the end." At that moment, Arthur revealed what he had never told anyone. Sarah had left him a small wooden box with instructions to only open it if her son ever needed help. Arthur's revelation struck Martha's heart like lightning. In that moment of confidences, the truth unfolded. Sarah's small box contained not only old documents, but a yellowed letter and a locket identical to the one Martha had given her son James when he was a child. Sarah's letter spoke of a secret youth relationship, of a son she had secretly had and given to a family in hopes of a better future for him. The son's name was James. At that instant, Martha understood the terrible and ironic truth. Her son, who had abandoned her while pregnant, was the same son Arthur had never known. Arthur, upon reading the name, felt a mix of shock and a belated pain for James's mother. The boy Sarah had lost and the son who abandoned Martha were the same person. Martha's pregnancy progressed, and she gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Hope. Arthur, moved by the fragility of the new life and Martha's strength, did not leave her. He took on the role of a protective grandfather to the baby, offering Martha the family that James had denied her. The lonely widower discovered a new purpose, a new light in his twilight life. Martha, in turn, found redemption and an unexpected love in Arthur's arms, a love forged in pain and overcoming. Little Hope, the link between the two, would grow up in a home full of affection and truth, where the past, though painful, finally brought healing to them both. If this story touched your heart as it touched ours, consider subscribing for more narratives of strength and overcoming. And you, what would you do if you discovered such a deep secret about your family? Share this story with someone who needs a dose of hope.